Ed Sullivan sat in his office reading the list of demands that had just been delivered by Barbra Streisand's representatives, and with each line his face grew redder. It was October 1963, and Barbra Streisand was 21 years old, had never appeared on national television, and was currently making her Broadway debut in Funny Girl. She was a complete unknown to most of America, and she was demanding things that Frank Sinatra didn't demand, that Judy Garland didn't demand, that nobody in the history of the Ed Sullivan Show had ever dared to demand. Special lighting, approval of camera angles, the right to choose her own songs without network input, final say on which takes would be used. And most audaciously, she wanted to rehearse with Ed himself before the show to ensure he pronounced her name correctly and introduced her properly. Ed put down the paper and looked at his talent coordinator with an expression of pure disbelief. Who does this girl think she is? She's a nobody. We're doing her a favor by putting her on television, and she's giving Emmy a list of demands? Before we dive into this incredible story, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to witness is the moment when a 21-year-old woman from Brooklyn looked at the most powerful man in television and refused to be grateful for an opportunity she knew she'd earned. To understand why Barbra Streisand's demands were so shocking, you need to understand how the Ed Sullivan Show worked in 1963. Performers were grateful to be there. They showed up, they did what they were told, they thanked Ed profusely, and they left. The show had made careers for decades by following this formula, and the formula worked because Ed Sullivan had all the power and everyone knew it. But Barbra Streisand was not like other performers. She had grown up in Brooklyn as Barbara Jones Streisand, a girl with a nose that didn't fit beauty standards, a voice that was too big for her small frame, and an absolute certainty that she was destined for greatness that bordered on delusion. Except it wasn't delusion. It was just truth that hadn't been proven yet. By 1963, Barbra had already made waves in New York theater. She'd appeared in I Can Get It For You Wholesale, and had stolen the show despite having a small supporting role. Theater critics had started writing about this strange girl with the unusual looks and the extraordinary voice. And now she was the lead in Funny Girl, playing Fanny Brice, and the buzz was enormous. Ed Sullivan's talent coordinator had seen Barbra perform and had immediately recognized that she was special. Ed, this girl is going to be the biggest star in America. We need to book her now, before she becomes too expensive and too famous to care about our show. Ed had been skeptical. He'd seen the photos. Barbra Streisand was not conventionally beautiful. She had a prominent nose, an unconventional face. American television audiences expected their female performers to look a certain way, and Barbra Streisand didn't look that way. But the coordinator had persisted, and finally Ed had agreed to book her for one song on one show. It was the kind of opportunity that should have made a young performer fall to their knees in gratitude. Instead, Barbra Streisand had sent a list of demands. Ed called Barbra's manager, furious. Your client seems to be under the impression that she's running my show. Let me be very clear. These demands are completely unacceptable. If Miss Streisand wants to appear on the Ed Sullivan Show, she'll do it on our terms, not hers. Barbra's manager had tried to smooth things over. Ed, Barbra's not trying to be difficult. She just knows what she needs to look and sound her best. The lighting makes a huge difference for her. The camera angles matter. She's not being a diva. She's being a perfectionist. She's being impossible, Ed had said flatly. And if she doesn't withdraw these demands immediately, the booking is canceled. What happened next was unprecedented. Barbra Streisand got on the phone herself and called Ed Sullivan directly. Ed's secretary had tried to stop the call from going through, but Barbra had been insistent, and finally Ed had picked up the phone. Mr. Sullivan, this is Barbra Streisand. I understand there's been some confusion about my requirements for the show. Her voice had been completely calm, completely professional, not apologetic, not grateful, just matter of fact. Miss Streisand, there's no confusion. Your demands are completely out of line for someone at your level of career. Ed's voice had been cold. With respect, Mr. Sullivan, they're not demands. They're requirements. And they're not about ego. They're about giving your audience the best possible performance. You want me on your show because I'm talented. But I can't show that talent if the lighting is wrong, if the cameras are in the wrong position, if I'm singing a song that doesn't showcase my voice. I'm not trying to make your job harder. I'm trying to make sure that when 50 million people see me for the first time, they see me at my best." Ed had been thrown off by her directness. Most young performers were deferential, apologetic, eager to please. Barbra Streisand spoke to him like an equal, like she had every right to make these requests. "Miss Streisand, I've been doing this show for 15 years. I know what works on television and what doesn't. You're 21 years old and you've never been on television. Perhaps you should trust my judgment. Perhaps you should trust mine," Barbra had said. "I know my instrument. I know what I need. And I know that if you put me on your show the way you've put other singers on your show, I won't be able to give you what you booked me for. I'll just be another singer. But if you let me do this my way, I'll give you something your audience has never seen before." The audacity of it should have ended the conversation. Ed should have hung up and canceled the booking. But something in Barbra's voice had stopped him. Not desperation, not pleading, just absolute certainty. This girl believed every word she was saying. And Ed Sullivan had spent his entire career recognizing talent, and he recognized it now, even packaged in this completely inappropriate level of confidence. "Fine," Ed had said. "You get your special lighting. You get to choose your song. But you get one rehearsal, not multiple takes to choose from. And if any of this is a waste of my time, you'll never appear on this show again." "It won't be a waste of your time," Barbra had said. And then, proving she understood exactly how far she could push, she'd added, "Thank you for trusting me, Mr. Sullivan." The rehearsal had been scheduled for the afternoon before the Sunday night show. Ed had shown up prepared to be annoyed. What he got instead was an education in what it meant to be a perfectionist. Barbra had spent 20 minutes adjusting the lights herself, moving them a few inches at a time, testing how they hit her face from different angles. The lighting crew had been insulted, but Barbra had been relentless. "Higher. No, that's too high. See how that shadow falls under my nose. That's what I'm trying to avoid." She'd looked at Ed, who was watching with his arms crossed. "I know what you're thinking. She's vain. She's worried about how she looks. But it's not about vanity, Mr. Sullivan. My nose is already going to be the thing people talk about. I can't change my nose, but I can control how it's lit, and I need it lit in a way that doesn't make it the only thing people see." Ed had felt something shift in his understanding. This wasn't ego. This was someone who understood, with painful clarity, exactly what obstacles she faced, and exactly how to minimize them. When Barbra finally sang during rehearsal, Ed Sullivan understood why she'd made her demands. Her voice filled the studio in a way that made everyone stop what they were doing and listen. It was powerful, technically perfect, and emotionally devastating all at once. This wasn't just singing. This was something else entirely. October 20th, 1963, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Ed Sullivan introduced Barbra Streisand to America. "Ladies and gentlemen, making her television debut, Miss Barbra Streisand." He pronounced her name correctly. He'd rehearsed it 3 times with her in the afternoon to make sure. Barbra walked onto that stage, and the special lighting she'd insisted on hit her face exactly the way she'd planned. The cameras were positioned at the angles she'd specified, and she sang bewitched, bothered, and bewildered with a level of sophistication and emotional depth that television audiences had never heard from a 21-year-old. The studio audience had been silent during the performance, not because they were bored, but because they were listening, really listening. And when the song ended, the applause was immediate and sustained. Ed walked onto the stage to thank Barbra, and for once he was genuinely impressed. "Miss Streisand, that was extraordinary," Ed said on camera. "I have a feeling we're going to be seeing a lot more of you." Barbra smiled, and it was a genuine smile, not a practiced performer's smile. "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Thank you for letting me do it my way." The CBS switchboard had lit up during Barbra's performance, not with complaints, with questions. Who was this girl? Where could people buy her records? When would she be back on the show? By Monday morning, Barbra Streisand had gone from a New York theater curiosity to a national phenomenon. Ed Sullivan invited Barbra back to the show multiple times over the next few years. And each time, Barbra had her list of requirements. And each time, Ed grumbled about it, complained to his staff about her being difficult, and then gave her exactly what she asked for. Because Ed had learned something from that first appearance, when someone is that talented and that certain about what they need, fighting them is stupid. In later years, Ed Sullivan was asked about Barbra Streisand in interviews. "She was the most difficult performer I ever worked with," Ed said in 1970. "And she was also one of the best. The two things are related. She demanded perfection from everyone around her because she demanded it from herself. Was it annoying? Absolutely. Was it worth it? Every time." Barbra Streisand became one of the biggest stars in the world. She won Oscars, Grammys, Emmys, Tonys. She became the best-selling female recording artist of all time. And she never stopped making demands, never stopped insisting on control over her image, her performances, her career. The entertainment industry called her difficult for decades. Barbra called it being professional. In a 1975 interview, Barbra was asked about that first Ed Sullivan Show appearance. "I was 21 years old, and I had the nerve to tell Ed Sullivan how to light me, how to shoot me, what song I would sing. People thought I was crazy, but I knew something they didn't know. I knew I was good enough to make demands, and I knew that if I let them do it their way, they'd make me into what they thought a female singer should be: pretty, deferential, grateful. I wasn't any of those things, and I wasn't going to pretend to be." The interviewer had asked if she'd been scared that Ed would cancel her. Barbra's response was telling. "Of course I was scared, but I was more scared of succeeding on their terms than failing on mine. Because if I succeeded by being what they wanted instead of who I was, I'd have to keep pretending forever. And I'd rather fail as myself than succeed as someone else." Ed Sullivan died in 1974, and Barbra Streisand attended his funeral. She told a reporter afterward, "Ed and I fought constantly. Every time I was on his show, it was a battle. But he respected me because I fought back. He didn't like performers who just said yes to everything. He liked people who knew what they wanted and weren't afraid to ask for it. We drove each other crazy, but we also understood each other." The legacy of Barbra Streisand's first Ed Sullivan Show appearance isn't just that a star was born. It's that a new template was created. After Barbra, other performers started making demands, started asking for control over their images and performances. The idea that you should just be grateful for the opportunity started to erode. And it started with a 21-year-old girl from Brooklyn who looked Ed Sullivan in the eye and said, "I know what I need, and I'm not apologizing for needing it." If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button. Barbra Streisand was called difficult for demanding excellence, and she turned being difficult into being legendary. Have you ever been called difficult for knowing what you needed and refusing to settle for less? Share your story in the comments below.